In the last video, we saw how by the 1100s, the two strongest samurai clans, the Taira and Minamoto, both had eclipsed the power of the central government. However, their intense rivalry would boil over into conflict during the Heiji Rebellion of 1160, in which the Taira would emerge victorious and exile the remaining Minamoto lords far away into the east. Now, with complete control of the capital, the Taira were set to rule the country. That is, until the leader of the Taira clan, Taira Kiyomori, would overstep his boundaries and cause Japan to enter into the first great samurai conflict, the Genpei War. By 1167, the Taira were easily seen as the strongest clan in Japan, with Taira Kiyomori being the most important noble of his time. The Minamoto clan, the only true rival to the Taira clan, had been defeated and exiled far away into the east, with each surviving member of the Minamoto clan separated from one another, as to prevent any conspiring to return to power. It was in this year that Taira Kiyomori would receive the titles of Chief Minister of the Government and Home Minister, both titles allowing him to further sink his teeth into the political structure of the central government. This would also be the first time that a noble from the samurai clans would be granted these positions. Of course, with this newfound influence, Kiyomori would relinquish his control of the Taira clan over to his son, Taira Shigemori. Kiyomori would then set out to reshape the government in a fashion in which the Taira would be the sole rulers. Until this point, Kiyomori had held great sway over the retired emperor Goshirakawa and his grandson, the reigning emperor Rukojo. However, it would not be long before Goshirakawa would replace Rukojo with another one of his own sons, Takakura. In 1172, Kiyomori would make his daughter, Tokuko, Emperor Takakura's consort, further consolidating his position at court. However, Taira Kiyomori's aims would not go unnoticed, as his continued meddling in the government affairs began to upset the many members of the court, as well as the retired Emperor Goshirakawa, leading to the remaining members of the Fujiwara clan, which still held positions at court, conspiring with Goshirakawa to rid the capital of Taira influence. However, a spy for the Taira clan would reveal the plot and cause all the conspirators to be arrested and their land and positions seized by Taira nobles. In 1179, Taira Kiyomori's son, Shigemori, who was the current ruler of the Taira clan, died and was replaced by his brother, Taira Munemori. Goshirakawa viewed this shift in power as an opportunity to rid Kyoto of Taira influence. Thus, he began dismissing Taira nobles from their positions at court. In December of that year, Kiyomori would retaliate against Goshirakawa and march an army of several thousand troops into the capital and place Goshirakawa under house arrest. It was then that Kiyomori made a couple of decisions that would come to rile all of Japan into war. He would begin by removing all of his political rivals from the government and banishing them, only to be replaced by loyal Taira nobles. And more importantly, he would dethrone the Emperor Takakura by taking the emperor's son, who was Taira-born, and proclaiming him to be the new emperor. This child's name was Antoku. In May of 1180, Other noble families began to send emissaries to the exiled Minamoto lords, asking for their support against the Taira. However, it would not be until Go-Shirakawa's son, Prince Mochihito, would issue a general call to arms against the Taira that the exiled Minamoto lords would finally rally against their old enemy and begin the Genpei War. The Taira would immediately move against Prince Mochihito, who was being sheltered by warrior monks from the Mi-Deira temple outside of Kyoto. Minamoto Yorimasa was the first Minamoto lord to come to the aid of the prince, at the head of a small loyal force of samurai. However, a monk with Taira sympathies would reveal the hidden location of Mochihito, forcing him to flee southwards toward Nara. The prince, along with a band of warrior monks, would rendezvous with Minamoto forces and make their way across the ancient Uji Bridge. As they did so, the warrior monks would attempt to tear up the planks of the bridge in hopes to halt the Taira army hot on their trail. However, it would all be in vain, as when the Taira forces did arrive, they found the river to be crossable without the use of the bridge. The warrior monks would valiantly hold off a portion of the Taira samurai, but would ultimately be overcome as Taira soldiers began crossing through the water to engage Minamoto forces fleeing on the opposite bank. In the midst of battle against the much larger Taira force, Yorimasa would be struck by an arrow. Viewing his position to be a futile one, he committed an act which would go on to echo throughout the samurai for the rest of their existence. Yorimasa would find a safe place in the midst of the conflict, in which he would write a quick poem about his tragic end. Like a fossil tree, from which we gather no flowers, sad has been my life, fated no fruit to produce. After which, he would take his short sword and cut open his stomach. This would be the first famous record of a samurai committing seppuku, ritualistic suicide. It would not be long before the remaining Minamoto forces were defeated, and Prince Mochihito would be captured and executed. The Taira army continued their advance towards Nara in attempts to put down all other monasteries of warrior monks who openly opposed them. By the end of the campaign, though the warrior monks put up stiff resistance, most of the major temples in Nara would end up being destroyed. With Yorimasa dead, his brother, Yoritomo, would emerge from exile and declare himself the next head of the Minamoto clan, winning over his court-appointed guard, Hojo Tokimasa, who would end up joining the Minamoto cause. Yoritomo would then attempt to rally other lords of the Kanto region to his cause, but many would choose to reject his pleas, or instead side with the Taira against him. In September of 1180, Yoritomo was attacked by Taira loyalists while moving through the Hakone Mountains. Yoritomo's forces would be defeated and scattered, but would eventually regroup. It was then that Yoritomo would move his small band to somewhere safe, a small fishing village in Sagami province, known as Kamakura. It would be here that Yoritomo would set up his base and begin to consolidate his power. In time, many of the local lords who had previously opposed him began to reconsider their position and turned to side with him against the Taira, eventually growing Minamoto Yoritomo's small force into a large army. The stage was setting for a massive battle between the Taira army and the new Grand Army under Minamoto Yoritomo. By the fall of 1180, both armies had come out of their respective cities and faced each other at the Fujigawa River. However, battle would not come to fruition, as the Taira would ultimately decline to engage in combat against the overwhelming numbers of the new Minamoto army, forcing them to make their way back to Kyoto. The following months proved to be quiet ones, as the main forces of the Taira and Minamoto held back their advances. Fighting still occurred across the countryside, however, as lesser lords declared their allegiances and entered the fray. In early 1181, the great patriarch of the Taira clan, Taira Kiyomori, would die, leaving his son, Taira Munemori, in charge. While Kiyomori had been far more defensive against the Minamoto threat, Minamoto adopted a far more aggressive mindset, moving eastward against his enemies, resulting in the Battle of Tsunomata. Taira forces, under the command of Taira Tomomoori, made their camp on the west bank of the Tsunomata River, opposite to a Minamoto army that had arrived to the east. The Minamoto forces, under the command of Minamoto Yukie, would attempt a surprise night attack across the river, but it would completely fail, as Taira forces could easily tell friend from foe by the sopping wet clothes of the Minamoto soldiers. Yukie's army would flee east, being pursued by the Taira until they arrived at the Yahagigawa Bridge, where the Minamoto attempted to make another stand. They would fail here again against the might of the Taira and continue their full retreat. Kie's forces would have completely disintegrated if not for Tomomoori falling ill and causing the Taira army to stop chasing the routed Minamoto forces. Following the devastating defeat at Tsunomata, Minamoto Yoritomo would send an offer of peace to the Taira, suggesting a partition of Japan between the two families. Though the offer was met with willingness at court, the Taira would ultimately reject the notion. Interestingly enough, it is suspected that Yoritomo's bid for peace may have actually been in direct result to the growing power of his cousin in the north, Minamoto Yoshinaka. Yoshinaka had answered Prince Mochihito's call for war back at the beginning of the conflict, and had used the ensuing chaos to strengthen his power base and land holdings, mustering a grand army which rivaled that of the Taira and Yoritomo. What made Yoritomo nervous about his cousin Yoshinaka was his aggressive expansion into provinces not aligned with the Taira. It proved that he was more interested in personal gain than winning the war for the Minamoto cause. Yoritomo suspected that Yoshinaka may one day even be willing to move against his own family, as it was obvious he wanted to retake the home of his father, Musashi Province, which was already in the domain of Yoritomo. Yoritomo demanded that his cousin Yoshinaka accepted the fact that Yoritomo was the head of the Minamoto clan. He also demanded that Yoshinaka give up all aspirations of reclaiming his father's land, and sent his son as a political hostage to be raised in Kamakura. These humiliating demands only strengthened Yoshinaka's resolve to take Kyoto, defeat the Taira, and take control of the Minamoto clan for himself. A famine had caused most of 1182 to be an uneventful year for the war, but by the spring of 1183, conflict resumed. The Taira now viewed Yoshinaka as the superior threat instead of Yoritomo. Thus, in March of 1183, the Taira army set out to crush Yoshinaka. The first major action was the siege of Huichima, in which the Taira succeeded in taking the fortress from Yoshinaka after a 2-month encirclement. The Taira would then continue their advance until coming into conflict with Yoshinaka's main force at the Kurikara Pass. It is here that Yoshinaka fooled the Taira into halting their advance by erecting tons of banners, making it appear his army was much larger than it actually was. At night, Yoshinaka then began a 3-pronged assault against the Taira, using a stampede of flaming cows to ensure greater chaos. The unsuspecting Taira were easily scattered and routed. Over the coming days, as they attempted to flee, Yoshinaka would continue to pursue them and crush all remaining pockets of resistance. By the end of the battle, the main army of the Taira had been defeated, and nothing stood in the way of Yoshinaka's advance on the capital. With no choice but to flee, Taira Minamoto evacuated Kyoto and headed west with the child emperor Antoku. Although Yoshinaka would at first be welcomed into Kyoto as a liberator, being bestowed with gifts and ranks from the retired emperor Go-Shirakawa, his relations with the capital would soon begin to deteriorate. He and his warriors' rough country manners began to cause tension with Go-Shirakawa and the rest of the Kyoto aristocracy. However, a larger source of tension between Yoshinaka and Go-Shirakawa was due to the fact that Yoshinaka seemed to not care about chasing down and ending the Taira. This allowed the Taira to regroup and rally their forces in the west. Finally, in September, Yoshinaka would be forced to take action against the Taira. However, this time, the Taira would have much more luck against Yoshinaka's forces. They would defeat the Minamoto army at the Battle of Mizushima and advance on the capital in aims to retake it. This is when paranoia began to set in on Yoshinaka, as he was informed of talks between Go-Shirakawa and Yoritomo on ridding him from the capital. In an attempt to save his ambitions, Yoshinaka would reach out to the Taira and Fujiwara about seizing Go-Shirakawa, taking over the capital, and setting up a new government in the northern provinces. As the Taira advance continued as far as Harima, Minamoto Yukie independently attempted to halt their advance with a heroic final attack at the Battle of Miroyama. However, the Minamoto forces would end up being encircled by the Taira and crushed. Yukie would luckily make a narrow escape in his second failure against the Taira. Eventually, in the east, Yoritomo would take action against his troublesome cousin Yoshinaka, ordering his loyal brothers to lead their armies to reclaim the capital from Yoshinaka. In early 1184, beset by enemies on all sides, Yoshinaka commanded his troops to sack Kyoto and kidnap Go-Shirakawa. He then forced Go-Shirakawa to name him shogun, so that he could further attempt to rid the capital from all enemy influence. Minamoto Yoritomo's forces would soon besiege the capital and cut off any attempt for Yoshinaka to escape. Eventually, Yoshinaka would try to flee to the north, where he would be engaged by Minamoto Noriyori. A heroic last battle would be fought at Awazu before Yoshinaka would finally take an arrow to the head. This allowed Yoritomo's forces to finally seize the capital. However, the threat of the Taira in the west still remained. The Taira had now set up their stronghold at Yashima, on the northern coast of Shikoku, and prepared for a new campaign against the Minamoto. On March 14th, they would begin their new offensive by landing their forces in Setsu province. The Minamoto immediately retaliated, and thus began the Battle of Ichi-no-Tane, in which the Taira were defeated. However, many Taira samurai were still able to escape due to their ships, and the lack of any way to chase them by the Minamoto. In victory, though, the heads of 9 Taira commanders were taken and brought to the capital for display. After the Battle of Ichi-no-Tane, a standstill set in as Yoritomo faced 3 separate issues and was cautious to advance further westward. The first was the distance that was between the west and his power base of Kamakura in the east. Such a range caused problems in maintaining order and command. The second issue was the knowledge of Taira loyalty to be thick in the west. Instead, he chose to send out many ambassadors to try and win over as many clans as he could. The third issue was the lack of any ships with which to launch assaults on the Taira stronghold of Yashima. Although this did not stop the highly romanticized brother of Yoritomo, Minamoto Yoshitsune, from assembling a fleet of fishing vessels with which to ferry his men across to Shikoku. On March 22nd of 1185, he would launch his attack on Yashima. In the midst of bad weather, much of Yoshitsune's forces would become lost in the crossing, only making it to shore with roughly 150 men. Yet, he would still accomplish the unthinkable. Much of the Taira army was positioned facing the water to defend against any attack from the sea. Yoshitsune, who had landed far away from them, ordered his men to light fires in the south to try to draw the Taira army away. It worked, and the Taira soldiers began mobilizing for what they thought was an attack coming from land. Yoshitsune then split his forces in 2. As one group attacked the Taira soldiers while they were repositioning, the other group assaulted Yashima directly. By the time Taira Munemori realized that he had been tricked, it was too late, and Yashima was in flames. The Minamoto forces then withdrew to regroup, while the remaining Taira army retreated further inland, unsure if more Minamoto armies had landed as well. Due to Yoshitsune's victory, and the victories against the Taira allies being won on the mainland, many more clans began throwing their support in with the Minamoto. Thus, the amount of ships available to them grew as well. On April 24th, 1185, the new Minamoto fleet set out to crush the previously superior Taira fleet. This would result in the final major battle of the war at Dan-no-ura. Although the Minamoto fleet was nearly double the size of the Taira would attempt to take advantage of the east-flowing morning tide and use it to encircle the Minamoto. As the battle began, this plan proved to work, as the Taira bowmen were able to deal devastating damage to the Minamoto forces aboard their ships. Unfortunately for the Taira, the tides would eventually reverse, and the Minamoto ships were able to break away. Seeing this to be the ultimate fatal blow, a Taira ally named Tagachi Shigeyoshi decided to switch sides to the Minamoto and reveal that one of the Taira ships was actually carrying the infant emperor Antoku. The Minamoto then bared down on that ship and caused Antoku's grandmother to take the child and leap overboard to their deaths. Upon seeing this, the Taira forces completely collapsed, as many chose the same fate and leaped overboard into the water, allowing their heavy armor to carry them under. The Taira leader, Munemori, attempted this as well, but was pulled from the water by the Minamoto and later executed. The destruction of the Taira clan at the Battle of Dan-no-ura saw the end of the Genpei War. So, what have we learned? The constant weakening of the imperial state between the 700s and the 1100s would eventually allow the samurai clans of the Taira and Minamoto to become the strongest in Japan and reduce in influence the strength of the central government substantially. Conflict over true dominance of Japan between these two clans would end up all boiling over into the Genpei War, Japan's first great war of the samurai. The Genpei War would see Japan split like never before, as the many clans would choose to either stand with the Taira or the Minamoto, often with interfamily conflict occurring as well. And in the end, the Taira would be defeated and wiped out completely, allowing the Minamoto to take ultimate power. In the next video, we will address the aftermath of the Genpei War, looking at how it would go on to shape samurai culture in many ways. And we will also see the establishment of Japan's first military dictatorship, the Kamakura Shogunate. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most informative.